Our guest via Zoom is Ken Phillips, who's the co-founder and executive director of Self-Employed Australia. For those of you that don't know, Ken has assisted self-employed people for a great many years now with a host of issues that affect business. And Ken, it's been a worthwhile endeavour. How are you? And thank you for joining us on The Informer.
Thanks very much, George. And like everyone, I'm quite enjoying another period of lockdown in Melbourne. So we're now up to, over the last, I did the calculation for an article recently, for the last 450 days, Victorians or Melburnians have been in lockdown for in excess of a third of that time. So it's a third of our lives have just disappeared out of this whole situation. I was in Sydney just before the lockdown started, and I've got to say, people interstate just don't comprehend what's going on in Victoria. And you wouldn't expect them to either.
No, I understand exactly where you're coming from. And for our schools in Victoria, it must be extraordinarily difficult for both teachers and students. And when you consider the number of weeks that they've missed already, it's just incredible. Can I just move on the discussion, because we need to address something that's you've been very much involved in, and it's been a campaign that has kept you very busy. And I need to talk to you about D-Day, or this decision day, which is looming for both the Premier Daniel Andrews and his government. I understand that Safe Work Australia is waiting to hear from WorkSafe Victoria in regards to an investigation into the government's actions last year, which, as we all know now, cost more than 800 lives in this state. Now, have you heard whether WorkSafe Victoria will or won't proceed with the allegations that Self-Employed Australia has made about the government being guilty of committing a number of criminal breaches of the work safety laws in the state of Victoria?
So to be clear, George, to qualify that, we've made 142 allegations of breaches of the WorkSafe Act. The timing on that now is that the WorkSafe Authority must respond to us by the 29th of June. So the clock is now ticking quite strongly. We have been continuing to correspond with them on a fairly regular basis. The responses from them to us have somewhat ceased. And so we're getting silence, but they must reply by the 29th of June. Now, they must then inform us if they are prosecuting or not. We are working on the anticipation that they will probably not prosecute, and not, or if they do, certainly not on the 142. So the next step then immediately is that we then require them, as per the Act, to refer the entire matter to the DPP, to the Director of Public Prosecutions. And the Director of Public Prosecutions is then required to review the investigation that WorkSafe have conducted. The step after that is that there's no then time limit on the review from the DPP, but we believe that a 3 to 6 month period is a reasonable time. And so the DPP then ultimately must respond to us, or specifically myself, as I'm the author of the letter to them, and then explain fully whether or not the prosecution is to occur or not to occur. And our understanding, or my understanding or advice from lawyers, again, I'm not a lawyer, is that at that point, they must supply us the full briefing and investigative outcomes. And so we'll find out where they actually stand. So there's still quite a process to unfold. And I would like to think that WorkSafe exceed my expectations, but we wrote to them earlier this year asking some fairly simple questions that didn't relate specifically to we were asked questions relating to process. How many people have you got working on this? How many interviews have you conducted, et cetera, et cetera. So a series of questions that would not compromise the investigation in any way. And we're just asking, how's the investigation going? Tell us what the volume is. And there's dead silence to that. So there's a lot going on that doesn't give me a great deal of confidence in this stage. In actual fact, I have to say I'm quite disappointed.
You've also run quite a strong radio campaign, and you've done it across quite a number of platforms. What have you made of the campaign? What was the feedback? And what was the fallout? Has there been any fallout?
Well, again, from WorkSafe, it's a wall of silence. So we can't judge whether there has been any feedback or fallout from their end. I have had some interesting phone calls from people who have informed me that they have been onto WorkSafe themselves, emailing, phoning, etc., etc. So there seems to have been a body of people out there who said, hang on, there's an issue here. And certainly it's necessary in this sort of environment that community gets involved. And so our messaging has been as much to WorkSafe, but to the community to say, look, this is something very practical that can and should be done. It's not being done to our knowledge at this stage. Exercise your right as a citizen, as a member of our society, and demand it be done. So that's really what the advertising was all about.
So the campaign was to energise not only the community, but also to allow people to understand the veracity and also the severity of the allegations that were made against the government. What's the likelihood of any criminal investigations proceeding based on what you've said to me this morning?
Well, the WorkSafe Authority is the authority that's required to do this, and based on our allegations and on the evidence, particularly from the Coate inquiry, in terms of the behaviours or non-behaviours that occurred, if this were a private company that we're dealing with, certainly in our view, the prosecutions would have been well underway. And this is very, very solid evidence, very solid evidence. And as far as we're concerned, it's being ignored. It does raise issues of the state of our democracy in Victoria, the state of the rule of law in Victoria. You'll notice that our campaign theme is no one is above the law, so not above the law. And I think we have to be very concerned, very concerned.
Well, as you said, there's a date. It's the 29th of the month, I think you mentioned.
Yes.
That means there's nigh on 3 weeks for Safe Work Australia to address the issue with WorkSafe.
Safe Work Victoria that we're dealing with.
Safe Work Victoria.
Sorry, WorkSafe Victoria, yeah.
Okay.
So they're the specific authority, yes.
All right. It's the national body, though, is working with WorkSafe Victoria to come to an understanding of what's transpired. Is that correct?
I'm not aware of the involvement of the federal body in this at all.
Okay.
This is quite specifically, the Act is a Victorian Act. The power is in WorkSafe Victoria's hands. That's where the legislation sits.
All right. Well, we will bide our time now. There are 2 or 3 weeks to go. Let's see what transpires. You've run the campaign, and you've made it very clear to all and sundry that in your eyes, the state government of Victoria committed something in excess of 140 breaches of the WorkSafe Act, and something needs to be done about it. Is that correct, Ken?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you very much for joining us, and we trust that you will keep us up to date if there are any developments.
Absolutely. You can guarantee on that.
Ken Phillips joining us on The Informer. Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, George.